For years, it had been home to astronomers who spent their nights studying distant galaxies, searching for answers to questions most people didn't even think to ask. One of those astronomers was Emily Carter. Emily wasn't like everyone else in Crestwood. While others went about their lives focused on jobs, families, and hobbies, she lived for the mysteries of the universe. Every night, she would climb the spiral staircase to the observatory's control room, where she could sit, surrounded by blinking monitors and humming equipment. Her job was simple: analyze data collected from deep space and look for anything unusual. Most nights, she found nothing more exciting than patterns of light from faraway stars. But one night, everything changed. It started as a faint signal, a series of repeating pulses coming from a region of space no one had paid much attention to before. At first, Emily thought it might be interference from Earth-based sources or a glitch in the equipment. She ran tests, adjusted settings, and recalibrated the instruments, but the signal remained. It wasn't random noise. It had structure, rhythm, and purpose. As she stared at the screen, her heart began to race. This wasn't just another cosmic event. It was something deliberate. For weeks, Emily worked tirelessly to decode the signal. She pored over charts, graphs, and waveforms, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. The pattern was complex, almost musical, and it repeated every 6 hours without fail. Slowly, piece by piece, she unraveled its meaning. What she discovered left her breathless. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a cry for help. The transmission came from a planet called Zelo 7. It's located in a star system billions of miles away. According to the message, the inhabitants of Zelo 7 were facing extinction. Their world was under attack by an unknown enemy, and they were desperate for allies. The message described cities burning, skies darkened by smoke, and millions of lives lost. It ended with a plea: "We are not alone. If you hear this, please help us." Emily knew she couldn't keep this discovery to herself. She needed someone to share her findings with, someone who could understand the gravity of what she had uncovered. That person was Robert Hayes, a fellow astronomer who worked at the observatory. Robert was practical and cautious, the kind of person who always double-checked his work before jumping to conclusions. When Emily told him about the signal, he listened carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. At first, Robert was skeptical. "Are you sure it's real?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Signals like this have been misinterpreted before. Maybe it's just a natural phenomenon." "It's not," Emily insisted. "I've checked everything. The pattern is too precise, too deliberate, and the content's unmistakable. They're asking for help." Robert sighed, rubbing his temples. He wanted to believe her, but the implications were overwhelming. If the signal was genuine, it meant humanity wasn't alone in the universe and that other intelligent beings were reaching out for the first time. "If this gets out," he said quietly, "it'll change everything." Together, they decided to present their findings to NASA and the United Nations. They spent days preparing reports, gathering evidence, and rehearsing their presentation. When the day finally came, they stood in front of a panel of scientists, military officials, and government representatives explaining what they had discovered. The room fell silent as they played the decoded message, the haunting tones filling the air. The reaction was mixed. Some members of the panel were awestruck, their eyes wide with wonder. Others looked uneasy, shifting in their seats as if unsure how to respond. But it was General Marcus Kane, a stern man with graying hair and a no-sense demeanor, who spoke first. "This changes nothing," he said firmly. "We don't know who or what sent this message. For all we know, it could be a trap." Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "But they're asking for help," she argued. "How can we ignore that?" "We can't risk exposing Earth to potential threats," Kane replied. "If we send aid, we need to be prepared for anything, including war." The debate raged on for hours, with voices rising and tempers flaring. In the end, the decision was made. Earth would respond, but not with humanitarian aid. Instead, the United Earth Defense Force would assemble a fleet of advanced warships, armed to the teeth and ready for combat. The mission was clear: assess the situation, protect humanity, and eliminate any threats. As news of the decision spread, public opinion became divided. Some saw it as a necessary precaution, while others condemned it as an act of aggression. Emily watched from the sidelines, feeling powerless to stop what was happening. She had hoped humanity would rise to the occasion, showing compassion and solidarity with a species in need. Instead, fear had won out. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the mission moved quickly. The fleet was led by Captain Laura Bennett, a seasoned officer known for her tactical brilliance and unshakable resolve. Her crew included Lieutenant Alex Monroe, a young pilot eager to prove himself, and Dr. Rachel Morgan, a xenobiologist tasked with understanding any potential biological hazards. Each member of the team had their own reasons for joining the mission, but none of them fully understood what lay ahead. As the ships were loaded with supplies and weapons, Emily visited the launch site one last time. Standing on a hill overlooking the facility, she watched as the massive vessels gleamed in the sunlight. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought about the message from Zelo 7, the desperate plea for help that Tay had been answered with warships instead of aid. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping that somehow, against all odds, things would turn out right. And then, with a roar that shook the ground, the fleet lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Emily stood there long after they were gone, staring. At the empty horizon, humanity had taken its first step into the wider universe, but whether it was a step toward peace or conflict remained to be seen. Each vessel was a marvel of engineering, designed to withstand the harsh conditions of deep space and capable of defending itself against any threat. At the center of the fleet was the USS Vanguard, commanded by Captain Laura Bennett. Laura was a woman of few words but immense presence. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her calm demeanor inspired confidence in those around her. She had spent most of her life in service, rising through the ranks until she earned the responsibility of leading humanity's first interstellar mission. For Laura, this was more than just a job, it was a test of everything she believed in. She knew the stakes were high, and the weight of her decisions would rest not only on her shoulders, but on the future of humanity itself. Her crew was a mix of seasoned veterans and eager newcomers, each bringing their own strengths and weaknesses to the table. Lieutenant Alex Monroe, for example, was one of the youngest pilots in the fleet. He had joined the military straight out of flight school, driven by dreams of adventure and a desire to make a difference. To him, this mission was the chance of a lifetime or chance to prove himself and leave his mark on history. But despite his enthusiasm, he sometimes struggled with self-doubt, wondering if he was truly ready for what lay ahead. Then there was Dr. Rachel Morgan, the xenobiologist tasked with studying any alien life forms they might encounter. Unlike many of her colleagues, Rachel had always been fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life. Growing up, she devoured books about planets, ecosystems, and the possibility of intelligent beings beyond Earth. Now, as part of the fleet, she finally had the opportunity to turn her childhood curiosity into real-world action. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about this mission felt off. Sending warships instead of humanitarian aid didn't sit well with her. But she kept her concerns to herself, focusing instead on doing her job. As the fleet left Earth's orbit behind, the crew settled into a routine, and the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before them. From the outside, it might have seemed monotonous, but inside the ships, tension simmered just below the surface. Conversations among the crew often revolved around the same questions. What would they find when they reached Xylo 7? Would the odds aliens be hostile? And why had Earth responded with weapons instead of compassion? One evening, as the Vanguard drifted silently through hyperspace, Laura called a meeting in the ship's briefing room. The walls were lined with screens displaying maps, schematics, and data streams, all glowing softly in the dim light. Around the table sat key members of the crew, including Alex and Rachel. Laura stood at the head of the table, her expression serious but composed. "We're halfway to our destination," she began, her voice steady. "I want everyone to be prepared for whatever we might face. This isn't just another training exercise. We're representing Earth, and how we handle ourselves will shape the future. Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking. Captain, I understand the need for caution, but do you think we're approaching this the right way? Sending warships sends a message, one that could escalate things rather than resolve them? Laura nodded slowly. I hear you, Doctor. Believe me, I've thought about it too. But we can't ignore the risks. If these aliens are under attack, their enemies could pose a threat to us as well. Our priority is to protect humanity, no matter what. Alex chimed in, his tone eager. And if we show up with enough firepower, maybe we can end the fight before it spreads. It's gotta count for something, right? Rachel frowned but said nothing. She admired Alex's optimism, but she worried that his eagerness might blind him to the bigger picture. Warships weren't just tools, they were symbols. And the message they carried could define humanity's place in the galaxy. Despite the unease hanging over the crew, life aboard the ships continued. Meals were shared in the mess hall, where laughter and stories helped ease the tension. Training exercises kept everyone sharp, simulating battles and emergency scenarios to ensure readiness. Evenings were spent staring out the observation windows, watching the stars streak past like rivers of light. For some, it was a reminder of the beauty of the universe. For others, it was a stark reminder of how far they were from home, back on Earth. Emily Carter followed the fleet's progress closely. Though she wasn't part of the mission, she felt connected to it in ways she couldn't fully explain. Every update brought a mix of hope and dread. She tried to stay busy, throwing herself into her work at the observatory. But her mind kept drifting back to the signal from Zillow 7. Had they done the right thing? Or had humanity made a terrible mistake? Her thoughts often turned to Robert Hayes, who had been invited to join the scientific team advising the fleet. Robert had accepted the offer, seeing it as an opportunity to contribute directly to humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. Before leaving, he had visited Emily one last time, bringing her a small token of gratitude, a photograph of the two of them standing in front of the telescope. This doesn't mean goodbye, he had told her, smiling warmly. No matter what happens, we'll still be working toward the same goal. Emily had smiled back, though her heart ached. Just promise me one thing, she said. Promise me you'll try to keep them from making things worse. Robert had nodded solemnly. I'll do my best. As the weeks passed, Emily found solace in writing. She poured her thoughts and fears into a journal, documenting not only the events unfolding in space, but also her reflections on humanity's role in the cosmos. She wrote about the signal, the cries for help, and the decision to send warships instead of aid. She questioned whether humanity was ready for the responsibilities that came with stepping onto the galactic stage, or if fear and mistrust would always dictate its actions. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard, the crew grew closer as the days went on. Bonds formed over shared meals, late-night conversations, and the simple act of being together in such an extraordinary situation. Laura made a point of checking in with her team regularly, offering guidance and reassurance whenever needed. She understood that morale was crucial, especially given the uncertainty of their mission. One night, as the ship sailed quietly through the void, Rachel approached Laura in the observation deck. The view outside was breathtaking as swirling nebula, painted in shades of purple and gold. Rachel stood silently for a moment, taking it all in. It's beautiful, isn't it? She said, finally breaking the silence. It is, Laura replied, her gaze fixed on the distant colors. But beauty can be deceptive. Out here, danger hides in plain sight. Rachel nodded, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever wonder what kind of legacy we're creating? Whether we're building bridges or walls? Laura sighed, leaning against the railing. Every choice has consequences. All we can do is make the best decisions we can with the information we have. Rachel fell silent again, lost in thought. She wanted to believe that humanity could rise above its fears, that it could choose understanding over conflict. But as the fleet hurtled closer to Xylos 7, she couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest choices on the truest tests were yet to come. Details became clearer. More alarming? From orbit, Xylo 7 looked like a world on the brink of collapse. Its once pristine atmosphere was now choked with smoke, and massive scars marred its surface where cities had been reduced to rubble. Fires burned in patches across continents, their orange glow visible even from space. It was a scene of devastation that left the crew of the Vanguard speechless. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the viewscreen as the planet loomed larger. Her hands rested lightly on the railing, knuckles white from tension. "This is worse than I imagined," she murmured, almost to herself. Lieutenant Alex Monroe, seated at the helm, nodded grimly. He had seen images of war zones before, but nothing compared to this. The scale of destruction was overwhelming. Dr. Rachel Morgan leaned over a console nearby, studying readings from the ship's sensors. "There's still life down there," she said, her voice tinged with both relief and concern. "But it's fragile, barely hanging on. Whatever attacked them hit hard." Laura turned to her communications officer, a young woman named Sarah Collins. "Have we received any signals? Anything at all?" Sarah shook her head. "Nothing yet, Captain. But I'm scanning all frequencies." We'll hear them." As the fleet settled into orbit, the crew prepared for their next steps. Laura ordered a team to begin scanning the planet's surface for signs of survivors, keeping a close watch for potential threats. She knew time was critical. If the aliens who sent the distress signal were still alive, they wouldn't last much longer without help. It wasn't long before contact was made. A faint transmission broke through the static, weak but unmistakable. The voice on the other end spoke in a language no one recognized, but the tone was desperate, pleading. Rachel quickly worked with the ship's translation software to decode the message. After several tense minutes, she looked up at Laura, her expression grave. "They're calling themselves the Valens," Rachel explained. "They're asking for immediate assistance. Their enemy, the ones attacking them, are called the Kryn. They've been fighting for months, and the Valens are losing badly." Laura frowned. "Do they know we're here? Can they tell we've arrived?" Rachel hesitated. "The message seems directed at us, but it's possible they sent it blindly, hoping someone would respond. Either way, they need our help." Before Laura could decide how to proceed, the situation changed dramatically. Without warning, dozens of alien ships emerged from behind Xylo 7's largest moon, their sleek, angular designs glinting menacingly in the sunlight. These were the Kryn. Their vessels moved with precision, forming a blockade around the planet. Within moments, they opened fire on the human fleet. Alarms blared across the Vanguard as energy blasts streaked past the ship's shields. "Shields. Holding," Alex shouted, his fingers flying over the controls as he maneuvered the vessel out of harm's way. "But they're fast." Laura barked orders, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Return fire! Target their lead ship!" The battle began in earnest, with bursts of light flashing between the ships as weapons discharged. The Kryn fighters were unlike anything the humans had ever encountered, agile, heavily armed, and seemingly unafraid to take risks. For every shot the Vanguard fired, two more seemed to come screaming back. Despite their advanced technology, the human fleet struggled to keep up. On the bridge, Sarah worked frantically to establish communication. "With the Kryn, we have to let them know we're not here to fight," she exclaimed, sweat beading on her forehead. "If we can just talk to them." "It's too late for that," Laura interrupted sharply. "They've already made their intentions clear." Rachel watched the battle unfold with growing unease. She understood the necessity of defending themselves, but the violence felt wrong somehow. This mission was supposed to be about helping others, not starting another war. Still, she pushed her doubts aside and focused on gathering data about the Kryn. Every piece of information could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Back on Earth, Emily Carter followed the news of the battle with mounting anxiety. Reports trickled in slowly, pieced together from fragmented transmissions sent by the fleet. Images of burning ships and explosions filled her screen, making her stomach churn. She couldn't stop thinking about the plea for help that had started it all. The desperate cry from the Valens that humanity had answered with weapons instead of compassion. Had they doomed themselves by choosing aggression? Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard, the crew fought valiantly, to hold their ground. Alex proved himself to be an exceptional pilot, weaving the ship through the chaos with skill and determination. His maneuvers allowed the fleet to regroup and launch a counterattack, targeting the Kryn's weakest points. Slowly, painfully, they began to gain the upper hand. Rachel's efforts paid off when she discovered a critical weakness in the Kryn ship's shielding systems. Their shields are powered by a central node, she explained to Laura, pointing to a schematic on her tablet. If we disable it, their defenses will collapse. Laura nodded, her mind racing. Can you pinpoint its location? I think. So Rachel replied, give me a few minutes. While Rachel worked, Laura formulated a plan. She called Alex to her side, explaining what needed to be done. I want you to lead a strike team, she said firmly. Take a small squad and target the Kryn flagship. Once Rachel gives us the coordinates, you'll disable their shield generator, understand? Alex swallowed hard, but nodded. Understood. Captain, the mission was risky, but there was no other choice. With the fleet's support, Alex and his team launched in fighter pods, speeding toward the Kryn flagship. The enemy ships swarmed around them, firing relentlessly, but Alex's training kicked in. He dodged incoming fire with practiced ease, guiding his team closer to their objective. Finally, Rachel's voice crackled over the comms. I've got it. The node is located near the rear of the ship. You'll need to hit it directly to knock out the shields. Copy that, Alex replied, his voice tight with focus. We're going in. What followed was a blur of action and adrenaline. Alex led his team in a daring assault, weaving through the Kryn defenses and unleashing a barrage of missiles at the designated target. The explosion was massive, sending shockwaves rippling through the flagship's hull. Shields flickered and died, leaving it vulnerable to attack. Seizing the opportunity, Laura ordered the fleet to concentrate fire on the damaged vessel. The combined assault crippled the Kryn command structure, forcing the remaining ships to retreat. As the enemy fleet disappeared into the distance, the bridge of the Vanguard erupted in cheers. They had won for now, but the victory was bittersweet. Below them, Zelo 7 remained scarred and broken, its people clinging to survival. Laura knew their work was far from over. Turning to her crew, she gave a weary smile. Good job, everyone. Now let's see if we can finish what we came here to do. The battle may have ended, but the real challenge was only beginning. From the intense fighting, smoke lingered in some corridors, and repair crews worked tirelessly to patch up critical systems. Despite the exhaustion etched on every face, there was no time to rest. Below them, Zelo 7 still teetered on the brink of collapse, its people desperate for aid. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the viewscreen as the planet rotated slowly beneath them. Fires continued to burn across its surface, and plumes of ash darkened the atmosphere. It was a grim reminder that while they had driven off the Kryn, the Valens were far from safe. We need to make contact, she said firmly, addressing her communications officer, Sarah Collins. Find out if they're willing to speak with us. Sarah nodded, her fingers flying over the console as she adjusted frequencies and boosted signal strength. After several tense minutes, a faint response crackled through the speakers. The voice was soft but clear, speaking in the same unfamiliar language as before. This time, however, it carried a tone of cautious hope rather than desperation. Rachel Morgan quickly coordinated with the translation software, piecing together the message. They're asking who we are, Rachel explained, glancing at Laura. They want to know why we came. Laura took a deep breath, choosing her words. Carefully, she turned to Sarah. Tell them we received their distress signal. We're here to help. As the message was transmitted, the crew waited anxiously for a reply. Moments later, a new transmission came through, this one accompanied by an image on the screen. The figure that appeared was unlike anything most of them had ever seen, tall and slender, with shimmering skin that seemed to shift between shades. Of silver and blue, the alien identified itself as Zinara, leader of the Valens. Its large, luminous eyes conveyed both wisdom and weariness, and its voice resonated directly in their minds, bypassing the need for spoken language. "Thank you for answering our call," Zanara said telepathically, its mental voice calm but tinged with sorrow. "We did not know if anyone would hear us or care enough to act." Laura stepped forward, addressing the alien directly. "We heard you. Your plea reached us, and we came as quickly as we could. But I must ask, what happened?" "Here, who are the Kryn?" Zanara hesitated, its expression growing somber. "The Kryn are scavengers, conquerors who seek only to exploit and destroy. They invaded our world months ago, seeking to harvest our resources. We tried to resist, but we are a peaceful species, unprepared for such brutality. Our cities have fallen, our people scattered. Without your intervention, we would not have survived much longer." The weight of Zanara's words hung heavily in the air. Rachel watched intently, her scientific curiosity mingling with empathy for the suffering race. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for all their advanced technology and preparation. Humanity had arrived too late to prevent the worst of the destruction. Still, she reminded herself, they were here now. It had to count for something. Laura nodded slowly, absorbing Zanara's explanation. "We'll do everything we can to assist you," she promised. "We need to understand the situation fully. How many of your people remain? Where are they hiding?" Zanara's gaze shifted slightly, as though weighing whether to trust these newcomers completely. Finally, it spoke again. "Most of our survivors are sheltering in underground bunkers, hidden from the Kryn. There are thousands left, perhaps tens of thousands. Many are injured or starving. If you truly wish to help, we need food, medical supplies, and protection." Rachel leaned closer to Laura, whispering urgently, "We should send teams down to assess the damage and provide immediate relief. My expertise could be useful in understanding their biology and ensuring our aid is effective." Laura considered the suggestion briefly before nodding. "Prepare a team," she instructed. "But be careful. We don't know how stable the area is, and the Kryn might return." While preparations were underway, Alex Monroe volunteered to lead one of the ground teams. Though his primary role was piloting, he felt a personal responsibility to contribute however he could. "I've flown missions before," he argued, when Laura raised an eyebrow at his request. "I can handle myself," reluctantly Laura agreed. Assigning him to accompany Rachel and a small group of engineers and medics, as they boarded a shuttle bound for the planet's surface, Alex glanced at Rachel, who looked unusually quiet. "You okay?" he asked gently. Rachel forced a smile, "Just thinking about how much they've lost. It's hard to imagine living through something like this." Alex nodded, his usual bravado tempered by the gravity of the moment. "Yeah, but maybe we can give them a chance to rebuild. That's got to count for something, right?" The descent to Xylo 7 was harrowing. The atmosphere was thick with ash, making visibility poor and navigation difficult. The shuttle jolted violently as it passed through turbulent air currents. But Alex kept his focus, guiding the craft toward a designated landing zone near one of the largest bunkers. When they finally touched down, the scene outside was even more devastating up close. Ruins stretched as far as the eye could see. Remnants of once thriving cities now reduced to rubble. The air was heavy with the smell of smoke and decay, and the silence was broken only by the distant rumble of collapsing structures. A group of Valens emerged cautiously from the bunker entrance, their movements slow and deliberate. They resembled Zinara, though their shimmering skin was duller, marked by dirt and injury. Their eyes reflected a mixture of fear and hope as they approached the humans. Rachel stepped forward, holding out her hands in a gesture of peace. "We're here to help," she said softly, knowing the universal translator would convey her meaning. One of the Valens, a female named Lisa Roan, nodded gratefully. Leading the team inside the bunker, inside the conditions were dire. Hundreds of Valens huddled in cramped quarters, their faces gaunt and hollow. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed and silent. Medical stations were overwhelmed with makeshift bandages and rudimentary tools being used to treat severe injuries. Rachel immediately set to work alongside the medics, tending to wounds and distributing supplies brought from the fleet. Knowledge of xenobiology proved invaluable as she adapted human medicine to suit the unique physiology of the Valens. Meanwhile, Alex assisted the engineers in setting up temporary power generators and purifying water sources. He marveled at the resilience of the Valens, who worked tirelessly despite their weakened state. "They've been through hell," he muttered to one of his teammates, "but they haven't given up." Back aboard the Vanguard, Laura maintained constant communication with the ground teams, coordinating efforts and monitoring for any signs of the Kryn's return. She also held a meeting with Zanara via holographic link, discussing long-term strategies for defending Zillow 7. "We drove the Kryn off for now," Laura explained, "but they may regroup and attack again. We need to fortify your defenses." Zanara nodded solemnly. "We are grateful for your assistance, but I fear your presence has complicated matters. The Kryn will see you as a threat, and they will stop at nothing to eliminate it." Laura frowned, recognizing the truth in Zanara's words. By intervening, humanity had inadvertently escalated the conflict, yet she couldn't bring herself to regret their decision. "We'll stand with you," she said firmly. "If the Kryn return, we'll fight alongside you." As the days passed, the bond between humans and Valens grew stronger. Despite their differences, they shared a common goal: survival. Rachel spent hours learning about Valen culture, fascinated by their history of art, music, and philosophy. She discovered that their society had once thrived on cooperation and harmony, values that seemed almost alien in the face of Earth's own struggles. Alex, meanwhile, found himself inspired by the Valens' determination to rebuild, even amid unimaginable loss. On Earth, Emily Carter followed the mission's progress with a mix of pride and unease. Reports from the fleet painted a picture of tentative success, but she couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's initial response had been misguided. Sending warships instead of humanitarian aid had saved lives, yes, but at what cost? The Valens ever fully trust humanity after seeing its first act as one of aggression? Her thoughts turned to Robert Hayes, who was part of the scientific advisory team aboard the Vanguard. In a rare moment of downtime, he sent her a brief message. "It's complicated. Emily, we're doing good work here, but the scars run deep for them and for us. I just hope we can learn from this." Emily stared at the screen, her mind racing. Humanity had taken its first step into the wider universe, but the road ahead was uncertain. For now, though, she allowed herself a small measure of hope. Perhaps in helping the Valens, humanity could begin to heal itself as well. Laura Bennett spent much of her time coordinating efforts between the ground teams and the ships in orbit, ensuring that resources were distributed efficiently. She also maintained regular contact with Zanara, the Valen leader, who would become an important ally in navigating the challenges ahead. Despite their shared goal of rebuilding, tensions lingered beneath the surface. Zanara's gratitude for humanity's intervention was genuine, but there was an underlying sadness in its voice whenever they spoke. "He came to help us," Zanara said during one communication session, its telepathic tone tinged with regret. "We cannot forget that your arrival brought warships, not aid. Your presence has changed everything for better or worse." Laura listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. She understood Zanara's concerns. Humanity's decision to respond with force rather than compassion had sent a message, one that might take years to undo. Still, she believed that their actions had been necessary. "Okay, we acted out of caution," Laura replied gently. "We didn't know what we'd find when we arrived. But now that we're here, we'll do everything we can to make things right." Zanara nodded slowly, its luminous eyes reflecting both hope and doubt, perhaps. Time will tell whether trust can grow where fear once ruled. On the planet's surface, Rachel Morgan continued her work alongside the Valens. Learning more about their culture and biology with each passing day, she marveled at their resilience, even as she struggled with the emotional toll of seeing so much suffering. The bunkers were crowded and chaotic, yet the Valons remained determined to care for one another. They shared food and supplies selflessly, prioritizing the needs of the injured and vulnerable above all else. Rachel found herself drawn to Lysira, the female Valon who had greeted them upon their arrival. Lysira often accompanied Rachel as she moved through the bunkers, explaining aspects of Valon society and offering insights into their struggles. One evening, as they sat together near a makeshift fire, Lysira spoke candidly about the impact of the Kryn invasion. "Before the Kryn came, we lived in harmony," Lysira said, her mental voice soft but steady. "Our world was peaceful, our lives centered around art, music, and learning. We never imagined such violence could exist or that it would come for us." Rachel felt a lump form in her throat. "I'm sorry this happened to you," she said, quietly. "If we had known sooner." Lysira placed a delicate hand on Rachel's arm, a gesture of understanding. "You are here now. That is what matters." Meanwhile, Alex Monroe threw himself into his tasks with relentless energy, determined to make a difference. He helped reinforce the bunkers, set up additional power generators, trained groups of Valons in basic defense strategies. Though he lacked formal military experience, his enthusiasm and quick thinking earned him respect among both humans and aliens alike. One afternoon, as Alex supervised the installation of a new water filtration system, he struck up a conversation with a young Valon named Kale. Like many of his kind, Kale was tall and slender, with shimmering skin that still bore faint scars from the conflict. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with quiet strength, always eager to assist wherever needed. "You remind me of someone back home," Alex said jokingly, handing Kale a wrench. "Always working hard, no matter how tough things get." Tilted his head curiously. "Back home? What is it like?" Alex paused, considering the question. "It's complicated. Earth is beautiful, but also messy. People argue a lot, and sometimes we don't treat each other the way we should. But we're trying to do better. That's why we're here to help, not hurt." Kale studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then perhaps we have more in common than I thought." Laura gathered the vanguard. Laura gathered her senior staff. For a strategy meeting, the initial crisis had been contained, but the threat of the Kryn returning loomed large. Intelligence reports suggested that the enemy fleet was regrouping somewhere beyond Zilla 7's moon, preparing for another assault. Laura knew they couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. "We need to fortify the planet's defenses," she said, addressing her officers. "The Valons can't protect themselves alone, and we can't risk losing them or ourselves to another attack." Lieutenant Sarah Collins raised a hand hesitantly. "What about diplomacy? Could we try reaching out to the Kryn? Maybe there's a way to negotiate peace instead of fighting." Laura sighed, appreciating the sentiment but aware of the realities. "The Kryn haven't shown any interest in talking. From what we've seen, they're driven by greed and destruction. Until they give us a reason to believe otherwise, we have to assume they'll keep coming." The team spent hours planning their next moves, refining strategies and assigning roles. Laura tasked Alex with leading patrols around the planet to monitor for signs of the Kryn's return. Rachel, meanwhile, focused on developing medical protocols specifically tailored to the Valon's physiology, ensuring that future casualties could be treated effectively. As the preparations continued, Emily Carter followed developments from Earth, her emotions swinging between pride and frustration. Public opinion about the mission remained divided, with some celebrating humanity's bravery and others criticizing its reliance on militarism. Emily wrote extensively about these debates, using her platform to advocate for a shift toward empathy and cooperation. Her latest article began with a simple question: what kind of legacy do we want to leave in the stars? She argued that humanity's first steps into the cosmos should reflect its highest ideals: compassion, curiosity, and unitize its fears and insecurities. The piece resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations across social media and news outlets. Worldwide, Robert Hayes, still stationed aboard the Vanguard, read Emily's words with a mixture of admiration and guilt. He admired her courage in speaking truth to power, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't done enough to prevent the escalation of violence. During a rare moment of downtime, he reached out to her via secure channel. "Your article hit close to home," he admitted. "I wish I could say I disagree with you, but I can't. We made mistakes, Emily. Big ones. But maybe it's not too late to fix them." Emily smiled faintly, touched by his honesty. "Fixing things starts with admitting we got it wrong. Keep doing what you're doing, Robert. Help those people down their heel. That's how we start making amends." Back on Zelo 7, the fragile alliance between humans and Valens grew stronger. With each passing day, together, they rebuilt what had been lost, forging connections that transcended language and species. Laura met regularly with Zanara, discussing plans for long-term cooperation and mutual defense. Though the wounds of war ran deep, there was a growing sense of hope, a belief that, despite their differences, they could build a brighter future together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the battered landscape, Rachel stood beside Lysira, outside the largest bunker. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of blooming flowers, a reminder that life persisted even in the face of devastation. "They'll come back, won't they?" Rachel asked softly, referring to the Kryn. Lysira nodded solemnly. "Yes, but we will be ready, and we will stand together." Rachel turned to look at her friend, seeing not just an alien, but a fellow survivor. "Together," she agreed, her voice firm with resolve, in the distance. The silhouettes of human and Valen workers moved side by side, repairing structures, planting crops, and laying the foundation for a new beginning. It was a small step, but it was a start. The first time since arriving, Rachel allowed herself to believe that Humani and the Valens might truly rise above their past mistakes and create something greater than themselves. Transforming into livable shelters. With clean water, reliable power, and medical care becoming more accessible, yet the shadow of the Kryn loomed large over everything they did. Everyone knew that peace was fragile, and that the enemy could return at any moment. Captain Laura Bennett stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her gaze fixed on the swirling stars outside the viewport. She had spent countless hours thinking about the mission the choices made, the lives saved, and the relationships forged. It wasn't easy leading a group of people into uncharted territory, knowing that every decision carried weight far beyond herself. But she had learned something important during her time. On Zelo 7, humanity's strength lay not in its weapons or technology, but in its ability to adapt, connect, and grow. Laura often found herself reflecting on her conversations with Zanara. The Valen leader had taught her much about patience, resilience, and the importance of trust. Though their species were vastly different, they shared a common goal to protect their people and ensure a better future. One evening, as the two spoke via holographic link, Zanara posed a question that lingered in Laura's mind long after their conversation ended. "What will you take back to your world?" Zanara asked, its voice calm yet probing. "Will you tell them of our struggles? Of the cost of war?" Laura hesitated before answering. "I'll tell them the truth," she said finally. "That we came here prepared for conflict, but found something else, a chance to work together, to heal instead of harm. Not everyone will understand, but I believe it's a lesson worth sharing." Zanara nodded, its expression thoughtful. "Then perhaps we have given each other more than aid. Perhaps we have exchanged wisdom." On the ground, Rachel Morgan continued her efforts to support the Valens, focusing not just on immediate needs but on long-term solutions. She worked closely with Lysira and other Valen leaders to establish sustainable farming practices using earth techniques adapted to Zelo 7's unique environment. The first crops, hardy grains and leafy greens, were already sprouting in carefully tended fields, a sign that life was beginning to flourish again. Rachel also took time to document her experiences, writing detailed reports about the Valens, biology, culture, and history. Her notes would eventually be sent back to Earth, providing humanity with its first comprehensive understanding of an alien species. But beyond the science, Rachel felt a deeper connection growing within her. Saw the Valens not as subjects to study, but as friends and partners. Their kindness and determination inspired her to think differently about humanity's role in the universe. One day, while walking through a newly planted field with Lysira, Rachel voiced a thought that had been weighing on her mind. Do you think we'll ever see a galaxy where species like ours can meet without fear? Where help comes without warships? Lysira paused, considering the question. Fear is natural, it replied gently. So is hope. Perhaps one day, stories like ours will show others that cooperation is possible even after conflict. Meanwhile, Alex Monroe had become a familiar face among the Valens. His energy and optimism made him popular, especially with the younger members of the community who looked up to him as a mentor. He spent his days teaching them basic engineering skills, showing them how to repair equipment and maintain generators. In return, they introduced him to their traditions, including music played on instruments crafted from salvaged materials. Alex found himself drawn to Kale, the young Valen he had befriended earlier. Together, they explored the ruins of nearby cities, searching for usable supplies and artifacts. During these excursions, Alex learned more about the Valens' way of life before the invasion, their love for art, their reverence for nature, and their belief in harmony. It was a stark contrast to the violence and chaos that now defined their existence. You know, Alex said one afternoon, as they sat atop a crumbling building, looking out over the horizon. Back on Earth, we spend so much time arguing about things that don't really matter. Seeing how you lived it makes me wonder if we've got it all wrong. Kale tilted its head curiously. Wrong how? It's just maybe we focus too much on dividing ourselves instead of finding ways to come together. You guys had it figured out, at least until the cringe showed up. Kale gave a small smile. Perhaps your arrival here is a reminder for both our peoples that unity is stronger than division. Back on Earth, Emily Carter followed the updates from Xylo 7 with a mix of pride and reflection. The mission had sparked widespread debate, with voices from all sides weighing in on humanity's response. Some praised the fleet's bravery and resourcefulness. Others criticized the initial decision to prioritize militarism over diplomacy. Emily used her platform to amplify the quieter voices, the ones calling for compassion, understanding, and change. Her latest book, titled Cries Across the Stars, chronicled the events surrounding the mission, weaving together interviews, personal reflections, and excerpts from Rachel's reports. It wasn't just a story of survival, it was a call to action, urging humanity to approach the cosmos with humility and empathy. The book became an instant bestseller, sparking discussions in schools, governments, and communities worldwide. Robert Hayes, still stationed aboard the Vanguard, read Emily's words with a sense of quiet pride. He admired her ability to turn complex emotions into something tangible, something that could inspire others. During a rare moment of rest, he wrote her a message, thanking her for giving voice to the lessons they were all learning. We're making mistakes, Robert admitted, but we're also growing. Maybe that's enough for now. Emily smiled as she read his words. It has to be, she replied. Growth is messy, but it's the only way forward. As the fleet prepared to depart Xylo 7, there was a mixture of sadness and gratitude in the air. The humans had accomplished much during their stay, but they knew their work was far from over. The Valens, though still recovering, were stronger and more resilient thanks to the alliance they had formed. Together, they had faced unimaginable challenges and emerged with a newfound sense of purpose. On the final day, Laura gathered her crew for a farewell ceremony held in the largest bunker. Zanara and several Valen leaders attended, standing alongside the humans as symbols of unity. Laura stepped forward, addressing the crowd with heartfelt sincerity. When we arrived here, we didn't know what to expect, she began. We came prepared for war, but found friendship instead. You welcomed us, trusted us, and worked with us to rebuild your world. For that, we are deeply grateful. Zanara stepped forward next, its luminous eyes meeting Laura's, and we thank you for your courage, your aid, and your willingness to stand with us. May this bond between our peoples endure, even as the stars watch over us, The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence, followed by a song performed by the Valens. Their voices blended harmoniously, filling the space with a melody that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of the universe, welled up in many eyes, human and alien alike. As the music conveyed emotions words alone could not express, as the fleet lifted off from Xylos 7, heading back toward Earth, the crew watched the planet shrink into the distance. For some, it was a bittersweet goodbye. For others, it was a promise to return. Laura stood on the bridge, gazing at the stars ahead. She knew the journey home would bring new challenges, new questions, and new opportunities to shape humanity's place in the cosmos. In the end, the mission to Xylos 7 had changed everyone involved. It had tested their limits, forced them to confront their fears, and shown them the power of collaboration. They had answered a cry for help not perfectly, but with sincerity and effort, and though the scars of war would remain, so too would the lessons learned and the bonds formed, as the Vanguard sailed silently through the void. Rachel sat in the observation deck, staring out at the endless expanse of space. She thought about the Valens, their resilience, and their unwavering hope for a better tomorrow. She thought about Earth, waiting anxiously to hear their story. And she thought about the future, a vast, unknown frontier filled with possibilities. "Are you ready?" Alex asked, joining her by the window. Rachel smiled softly. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together they watched the stars streak past, carrying with them the memories of a mission that had changed everything and the promise of a brighter path ahead.